Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Comprehension Strategies. My name is Cynthia. Happy to see you all today. I'm so happy that you could join us for today's live stream. We are just making sure everything is good to go here on my end. Awesome. I got confirmation that you can hear me. So once again, welcome to today's workshop. As I mentioned, my name is Cynthia, and I am an instructor here with Iris Reading. We are based out of Chicago. If you'd like to share where you're joining us from, we would love to see or read, in the chat where you're joining us from. And also, if this is maybe your first time attending a workshop with Iris Reading. We are so happy that we can do this live today on YouTube. We hope to do this more often with obviously different presentations. We have a lot of things cooking in 2023. So again, if you do enjoy today's workshop, please stick around, check out our YouTube channel. We are also on social media as well. So this is the year we are really trying to make our social media presence big, right? So as I mentioned, we are on YouTube, we are on Instagram, and we are on Facebook. We have a reading group, and it is called Book Lovers Assemble. And very excited to also share, we'll be starting or launching a podcast very soon, so stay tuned for that. Also want to share that the Speed Reading King himself is here with us today. He is managing the chat. Paul Novak, the founder and CEO of Iris Reading, is here. So if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. He will definitely answer those, and he'll be managing any questions that come in as well. So as we said, today we are talking about comprehension. Now, Iris Reading is really known for its speed reading and its memory techniques workshops. We've taught these in over 100 cities around the world, and we're very proud of that. We are now tinkering around with comprehension strategies, so we want to see how this goes. And of course, I appreciate your feedback. I'll also share my email. You can check out our website. You can make a submission on our website as well. And let us know your thoughts. So if you have attended a workshop with us in the past, then you might have heard of our Iris method. Now, I won't break it down today. I encourage you to check out our speed reading workshops, our memory workshop. We also have a workshop for note-taking and for productivity. So I won't delve too much into this Iris method. You might have heard of something called like the study cycle, right? And this is our version of the study cycle, and it is, of course, our four-step Iris method. I see some questions. Oh, I see some countries, some locations coming in. We've got people joining us from Malaysia, the UK, Spain, and Ohio. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for sharing your location as well. Jacksonville, Florida. Oh, I'd do anything to be in Florida. It's so cold in Chicago, and the whole state of Illinois. It's awful. It's so cold. Oh, Tampa, thank you all for joining. Very happy. So thank you for sharing that. Moving on, so we have said we do have a four-step process here at Iris Reading, and I do encourage you to check that out. Oh, hey, Chamara, welcome back. So happy to see you. Thank you. Yeah, I remember. Thank you so much for joining us again. Now, we wanna tie in a little bit more on comprehension. We do discuss this in our speed reading workshop, but again, when it comes to comprehension, Ireland, welcome. So sorry, I'm getting a little distracted with all of these locations, but I appreciate you sharing. Thank you so much. When we are talking about reading, taking notes, memorizing anything, comprehension is really important, right? And for most people, it's automatic, right? But for some of us, including myself, comprehension doesn't always happen as quickly as I hope it would, right? A little bit about myself. So I am originally a nurse. I got a BSN in nursing a while back. And if anyone here has ever taken anything in the medical field, any classes, any nursing school, really anything with anatomy, biology, it's really like learning another language, right? And so I struggled a lot to comprehend a lot of this material, right, in nursing school. Now it's not only the medical field, right? We know there are different fields that are very intricate as well, lots of vocabulary words, lots of just very, very technical material. It's all there. So what do we do when we're not understanding something automatically, when it's just not making sense? And I also remember being the kind of student that was like, well, why is everyone else getting this? How come I'm not understanding, right? So we're going to talk about something that can help us improve that comprehension as well. And we'll start off by saying, when we're learning something in a classroom, when we're learning something, maybe reading it out of a book or watching something on YouTube, you might think to yourself, okay, well, I already know this, right? We might say, I know I have to throw out the garbage. I know reading is important. I know what gravity is. I know, right? We say, I know a lot, but do we always really know what's going on? Like, do we actually comprehend? Okay, so let's test out your comprehension right now on something that I think a lot of us are fairly aware of. We know something about it, and that is of gravity. Okay, now gravity is something we learn, like I think in third, fourth grade, we start learning about gravity in science class. Now we know gravity, what goes up comes down, right? We know a lot about this, or we think we do, right, for the most part. So when we're thinking about gravity, all right, so we know, as we said, what is that story of Sir Isaac Newton sitting under the tree and the apple hitting him in the head, right? Okay, so we maybe know that as well. So, okay, is it enough to just know that just a little bit about it? Can we really say that we know about anything really about gravity? So let's test this out. All right, let's say we know, right? Because we say that a lot. I know whatever you throw up in the air is going to come back down. So do we know how the theory of relativity ties into gravity? Are we able to answer that? Do we know that much about gravity, right? Or do we know how quantum physics ties in to to gravity? Do we understand? Can we explain it, right? Or maybe how does distance tie into gravity as well? Now, I'm not going to answer all of these questions, but the point is that there are so many other avenues, right, that we can pursue when trying to understand gravity. And I like to call it more of like this multi-dimensional method of approaching comprehension, because is it enough to just know, like just to surface level know, or do we want to know, right? Do we want to know more? Do we want to deepen our understanding on something, right? And so that's really what we're going to talk about in today's workshop. Now, moving on here, we are actually going to break down comprehension, 6 different, what I call dimensions of comprehension. Okay, so I know is nice, but I'm not sure it's enough. Okay, so we're going to break it down and we'll see by the end of the presentation today what your thoughts are. Do you feel like you have a better understanding of maybe gravity? Okay, we'll break down gravity a little bit more. So we'll start off with explaining something. Okay, so as we learn, we want to be able to explain, right? That's really important. But unfortunately, this is kind of where most people they stop, right? They think if I can explain it, I'm good. I don't think I need to really review anymore, right? But when we're talking about explaining it, we're not just talking about explaining it to a peer, to a classmate. Can you maybe explain it to a child, right? Can you simplify your explanation? Can you explain it in another language? If you speak another language, right? Can you explain it in complex terms? So it reminds me of Feynman's technique, right? That's something that we do when we're taking notes. So can we spruce it up and just, again, simplify, because we want to be able to explain it, but we also want whoever we're explaining this to ask us questions. And I'm not talking about philosophical questions, just questions like, well, why? Why is this how you say, right? And again, the point here is to get whoever is listening to you to poke holes in what you think you know. And if we're answering, well, that's just because, or that's just how it is, do we really understand it then? All right, so again, remember, the purpose of this is to help deepen our understanding on something, especially when we're not comprehending immediately. Okay, so moving on, we know, right, if we put a ball down a ramp or we throw it down some stairs or something like that, it's going to roll down. Now, why though? Right? Why? Because the child might ask you, if you're explaining it to a 5 or 6-year-old, why is this the way it is? Right? So you're going to notice that throughout the presentation, we're going to ask a lot of questions, but we're also not going to answer them all either. Okay? Because we want our learning experience, we want to encourage our followers, our participants, as you're learning, you want to make sure that we're asking these questions. We want it to be about discovery. Okay, we really want you to think about what it is you're learning and try to approach, again, from different dimensions to comprehend this information, because it's not always going to be automatic. So we really want to use strategy as we're trying to understand. Okay, so again, why is the ball rolling down? If you can explain it, very good. If you can answer the whys, even better, but we don't want to stop there. Okay, so this is the first level, I guess you can say, we want to clear when we're trying to learn something. And I'll also mention, this doesn't have to be done in order. Okay, it's just this is kind of the route we took for today's presentation. But if you don't want to start with explanation, you want to start with another point, that is fine as well. Okay, so moving on to the different perspectives. All right, what are the different perspectives of what you're learning? Now, it doesn't really matter what subject we are learning. It's safe to assume that there may be people that maybe disagree with that, right? Maybe they have found reason to not believe that. Maybe they can prove that that is not true. Now, whatever the case is, they have their own reasons, right, for maybe opposing this information. So we want to try to get an understanding of what other people's thoughts or what the perspective is, opposing view on whatever it is that we are learning. Okay. Did you know that there is such an organization that they're called the AntiGravity Alliance? They don't believe in gravity, right? They say gravity is a lie. This is a real thing. You can Google it. And so they don't obviously believe. They say gravity is only a theory, right? Gravity cannot be proven. Gravity cannot be seen, heard, felt, tasted, or smelt. All right. They also have a list of supporting websites that are all, you know, I went through all of them for this presentation, and I said, oh wow, this is a legitimate thing, right? So they don't believe in gravity, right? Of course, we're not saying that it is or it's not. We're just saying this is a different perspective, right? And maybe most of us have never heard of people that even consider the thought of gravity not being real, right? So interesting again, right? There are the National Center for Science Education, right? They have they state that gravity is only a theory, right? So again, we're just going through different views, different points of view on this subject, right? People write their dissertations as well to get their PhD. Gravity is a myth. This is something that was written not too long ago. We also have found astrophysicists that don't believe in gravity. Dr. Brian Keating, he's got a YouTube channel and he discusses why he does not believe. So again, we have all of these points of view opposing something that we're learning, right? Or going against something that we're learning. Now, whether their views are right or wrong, or our views are right or wrong, the point is that we get a better understanding when we're able to see why they reason the way they do. And can you defend what you're learning as well? Right? Because we came into this saying gravity, yeah, all of us are like, absolutely, I believe in it. If I drop my phone right now, it's going to hit the ground, no question about that, right? But why are there so many people that are going against the subject, right? And again, we want to use this when we're learning as well. Obviously, we're just breaking down gravity today, but the goal is for you to do this anytime you're reading anything. Because again, if there is an opposing view, well, how can you defend what you are learning? Okay, so really, really important. And also, we're approaching, or we're changing the way you're approaching learning, okay? Because as we're learning things again, it can be very easy to just sit and listen and just kind of accept, or not really even care. But again, if we're talking about deepening our understanding, this is something that we really, really want to do. We want to ask these types of questions, the right type of questions, right? So that it can pique our interest. And again, we can ultimately understand better. Okay, so that is our second area that we want to make sure we are, again, delving into the different perspectives. So by now, maybe we can explain gravity well, right? Or whatever subject we're learning. Maybe we can defend our point of view versus someone else's point of view on a specific subject. All right, let's move now on to the third area of comprehension that we really want to make sure we tap into, and that is of self-knowledge. Okay, so it actually is all about you, right? You've heard people say, oh, it's not all about you. Well, when we're talking about learning, it actually is. All right, we do want you to focus on you. All right, now researchers have found that when individuals are learning things that I call, again, one dimension, just a flat fact that, doesn't mean much to us, people lose interest, right? You just learn one thing and you don't really see how that applies to you, or, what it could mean to you. It doesn't mean much, all right? So we want to think about how when we maybe learn how to read or write, let's talk about writing. If you learn how to write, we don't all learn how to write because we want to be an author, right? Or we want to work in journalism, we want to write articles. We don't all learn how to write because of that. We learn because we want to be better communicators, right? That's really important. And so we have to send emails, we have to send things to other people. So we learn how to write so that we can communicate, right? So again, it's like a channel. We want to make sure, again, that as we learn something, we're tying it in back to us. How does this help us? How does this affect us? How can we benefit, right? Really important as well. Some people learn about agriculture not necessarily because they love food, right? But because they are, interested in helping with world hunger, for example, or ending world hunger. So think about that again as you're learning. How does this all tie back to you? Okay, so we want you to look for function and for purpose. Now, when we're talking about gravity, again, most of us probably don't even think about it, right? But we also know that if we use eye drops, for example, we know that the eye drops are not going to float up, they're going to float down, right? Again, you don't have to be so interested in gravity to know that. So again, interest is not necessarily always something that's important when we're learning. All right, and let's be honest, there's lots of subjects out there that I'm sure most of us can do without having to learn sometimes, right? Or that's what we think, but we want to find some function and some purpose. We want to make it practical for us. Okay, so again, with the eye drops, for example, we don't have to worry about it floating up because we know it's floating down, sometimes down your face. But the point is, again, right, that it is, we have found some function and some purpose for what we're learning. And again, with gravity, this is just something we wanted to tie in, okay? So we've got explaining down. We've got our different perspectives down. Who would have thunk, right, that there are so many people that were not interested in gravity or didn't believe it, right? And I'm curious, if you want to share your views, feel free to leave them in the chat. I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this subject. We've talked about our self-knowledge, right? Let's now move on to empathy. Can you empathize with the material, right? And you would think, well, what? How am I going to empathize with algebra, for example? I hate it. I don't, but I'm just saying, I've heard lots of students say that they do, right? So again, moving on to empathy. Now, again, if you're thinking, well, I have no idea how to empathize with this subject, I'm trying to learn. Remember, purpose again with empathy is to help you get a better understanding of what it is you're learning. We could ask ourselves things like, what would it be like to maybe walk in so-and-so shoes, right? Or how might someone feel about this subject? Anyone, right? What was whoever wrote this, or, you know, the author trying to make us feel and see with this piece, right? So some leading questions as we are, again, learning to kind of empathize and see, again, tap into our emotions a little bit as we're learning. Now, we've been talking a lot about gravity. So who might need some empathy when it comes to gravity, right? Who works with gravity? Well, they don't necessarily work with it, but they kind of have to work. Yeah, I guess they have to work with it, right? Astronauts, for example, when they're up in space, they're kind of floating around. So how might we maybe try to empathize with an astronaut? Now, I feel like a lot of times we take a lot of things that we do just kind of like, you know, we do them so often we don't even think about how maybe other people can't always do these normal day-to-day things. Like, for example, going to the bathroom. Okay, have we thought about if everything down in Earth goes down, what happens when you're not on Earth and you're floating around in space? What would happen if we had to use the bathroom, right? Have you ever thought about that for an astronaut? Things floating up in the air, maybe? Now, I don't want to get obviously gross or yucky, but let's just think about it. Imagine if gravity is not present as we are using the bathroom, we can probably think of some pretty horrific things that are happening as we're using the potty, right? So I did obviously a little more research on this because I was like, wait a minute, how do they go to the bathroom if everything floats up there, right? So the Smithsonian had a nice article on this. It's how do astronauts go to the bathroom in space, right? A little look at the space shuttle toilet and the deepest, darkest secret about space flight. All right, again, we probably have never thought about this. You're probably like, what, right? But again, this is kind of like opened up a portal in your head about gravity, something that we've never thought about, right? So again, the article pretty much breaks down how there were foot straps and thigh braces to help the astronauts stay in place. Now, just imagine that while up in space, in a spacecraft. All right. So maybe can you now empathize with astronauts as they are up in space, having to use the bathroom? Okay. So again, we want to kind of use this approach when we are learning. Again, how can you empathize with maybe the author? How can you empathize with this passage? How could you empathize if you're maybe taking a psychology class, right? Whoever wrote your textbook or whoever your professor is, maybe even, what made them want to come into the field of psych, right? Maybe they have a family member that they have seen could have benefited from the use of maybe some, you know, help, for example, right? So again, empathy can really, again, help us get into that other corner of our brain to really understand again whatever subject we are really trying to understand. Okay, so empathy is a big one. So let's now move on to practical application. Okay, practical application. Now, how is this applied on the larger or in the larger world, right? This one is pretty easy again with gravity, because we know if we throw something, it's going to go up, 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 maybe if you have a very strong arm, and then it's just going to come down, right? So as we're learning, again, some of the questions that we may want to ask are, again, how and when can we use this knowledge, for example, okay? How is this applied, as I mentioned, in the larger world? How could we use this to overcome a specific obstacle, constraint, or challenge, right? Again, we know that if we are working on our desk, for example, and we put a cup of coffee at the rim or at the edge, and there's a little bit of movement, that's going to crash down, right? So most of us know, well, don't put the cup so close to the edge of the table, for example, right? So again, just thinking about that application is really helpful. We want to make sure that we are trying to actively apply this information in real world scenarios, okay? Even if you find the subject like just no, right? And as I said, there's lots of subjects like that that don't always necessarily mesh with us, right? And how we think. So we want to make sure that we are trying to apply this in a practical way. Okay, so that is our practical application level or dimension. Now, our final level that we'll talk about is how has this been interpreted by others? Okay, so when we're talking about gravity, well, we might think, I don't necessarily understand. I did some more, obviously, it's a little more research on the subject, and there is this whole line of what we call anti-gravity statues. All right, so these statues are supposed to be defying, I'm sorry, gravity. So there's this one, The Force of Nature by Lorenzo Quinn, which I believe is in Shanghai, for example. Some of us might be thinking, well, what? How is this even possible, right? And if you maybe think this is like, whoa, well, we also found this, all right? This is in the Fontainebleau Castle in Paris, France. So this is an elephant. And this is a real thing. It is pretty much holding itself up by his tusk. Okay, so again, defying gravity. How is this working? What is going on here, right? All these artists that have been inspired by gravity. We've got this too, right? These are the floating rocks, and they are in Cairo. Okay, so again, interesting. How is this staying up if everything in gravity is supposed to come crashing down, or with gravity it's supposed to come crashing down, right? I don't understand, or do we, right? So we might want to do some research on how these statues are holding themselves up, right? What was going on here? We also have the floating book sculptures that are in Madrid, for example, and this was my favorite. But again, how is this holding itself up, right? And I thought maybe it's just a lot of glue, like a lot of glue, but you know, there's more to it, right? So again, how have other people interpreted whatever subject we are trying to learn, right? If you are familiar with the composer Gustav Holst, for example, he wrote an entire an enormous, very long piece on the planets, for example, and a little bit of gravity is tied into that as well. And this is actually something that you can listen to. If you look it up on YouTube, it's Gustav Holst's Planets. All right, so again, just listening to someone else's interpretation on something, or maybe their artistic rendition on a specific subject, can again help deepen our understanding on the specific subject. Okay, so again, we don't want us to just listen to something and think, oh yeah, I know it, right? Because that might be fairly easy to do time to time. You just say, you know what, no big deal, you know. But we really want to approach understanding from a different method. Okay, so again, we have here our 6 areas to better comprehend. I hope that you find this a little helpful, or a little more helpful than maybe, again, we're reading something and it's just not making sense to us. Okay, so maybe using this as a breakdown, seeing if you can explain it. Okay, very good. Can you defend what your perspective or what other people's perspectives are, right, or not? What is that self-knowledge? Once again, right? It is all about you. So remember that when you are learning something, you want to make sure that you can tie it back to how you think. Can you empathize with the material as well? Okay, as you're learning, again, we want to make sure that we are finding some kind of practical application to whatever it is that we're learning. And our final step, which I've also found most people are not necessarily too interested in, just because a lot of people, you know, they don't like art, or they don't always understand something that is avant-garde. But even just a quick skim over something like this can help you better understand a specific subject. Okay, so with that, I think we will end our presentation. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop those in the chat. Also want to share, we obviously love all things related to reading, learning, right, memorizing, note-taking, and we are really big fans of this book, the Focus Manifesto by Leo Babauta. It's called Focus, a Simplicity Manifesto in the Age of Distraction. And this author has actually given us permission to share this book as well. So if you are interested in maybe reading this, feel free to send me an email, again, at cynthia@irisreading.com, and we can get that to you right away. Now, please don't forget to check out all of our social media. We are on Instagram. As I mentioned, we have a book club on Facebook, which is called Book Lovers Assemble. And of course, as you're watching on our YouTube channel today, so please check out our other videos, check out some of the videos that our founder and CEO has put up, specifically who we are, okay, how Iris Reading came to be. So with that, we will end the presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email. We also have a discount code for those of you that are watching. So if you are maybe interested in taking something a little more advanced, checking out our speed reading workshop, the one we mentioned we've taught in over 100 cities around the world, or our memory workshop, as I mentioned, the note-taking or productivity, you can find them all on our website. And with the code BOOKLOVERS, with all lowercase letters, you can get 30% off. All right, so with that, as I mentioned, that is pretty much the end of our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, and I hope to see you all in a future workshop. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.